Welcome back to another Mobalytics low elo tier list video. Patch 12.7 is yet another update with quite a few changes, so let's see how this affects all the different champions and the meta for this week. Before we get started, don't forget to click the link in the description to head on over to the tier list on our official website. There you can see it all for yourself and find builds, runes, guides and plenty more for every single one of these champions. So don't miss out on all of that useful information and advice. Anyway, let's get started with the top lane. In the god tier we've got Garen, Kayle, Yorick, Shen and Dr. Mundo. Gangplank and Yasuo move up to the B tier after some buffs this patch. Yone also jumps up a tier to the A tier alongside Lillia. Gwen also got buffed this patch, but due to a pretty tragic recent success rate, she's still sitting off screen in that C tier for now. Wukong also received some attention and he might be a little bit broken this patch, but we're going to cover him in the jungle section. So, we haven't included Gangplank in our low elo tier list for quite some time, as he's actually very difficult to play well. However, these buffs should make him that little bit stronger and make him appeal to the wider variety of ranked players too. Therefore, we've popped him in the B tier for now. In High-ELO, this S tier champion is probably one of the best champions in the entire top lane. His carry potential is ridiculous, and his damage with a barrel on a crit is like nothing you've ever seen before. So, if you're looking for a new one tricky champion to learn, if you get good at Gangplank, you will climb ranked for sure. Gangplank takes a ton of practice, and he's got quite a unique playstyle too to get your head around, but if you can learn him, you'll be rewarded by lots of LP. Yone also got a buff this patch, lowering his ultimate cooldown at ranks 2 and 3, which means he's going to be able to fight more often and duel more frequently. Yone's always been a pretty nutty champion at lower ranks, as when he gets fed he just seems to destroy everyone. If you don't have much CC, Yone can dash, dart and bounce around the rift, killing everyone and healing off any damage you try to deal with him. One of the best parts about Yone though is how versatile he surprisingly is. You can split push, you can side lane, you can flank, you can dive entire teams and you can even look to teamfight with a 5-man ultimate. Yone brings a huge amount of damage and disruption, and he can be insanely difficult to beat if he gets fed in the early game. These buffs will no doubt encourage more people to revisit Yone, so be prepared to play a lot more against him this week. Sett has been slowly getting back into his groove recently, and it's safe to say that some players are absolutely abusing this champion's strength again. Sett is super strong in a side lane, and if you go down the Hull Breaker route you can easily overcome those fights on your own and bring a ton of enemies to that side lane and often take a few of them out with you. Sett has just so many strong points. He's strong in fights in the early game, he stomps and snowballs super quickly, he can side lane very successfully, and he can also win team fights with his big AoE damage, initiation and crowd control. Sett's main weakness is how poor he can be when he gets behind and how prone he is to kiting in fights when he's on his own. As long as you play to your strengths though, Sett is an incredible pick this patch and he's a ton of fun to play, so why not? Moving on to the jungle now, and in the god tier we've got Rammus, Nocturne, Trundle, Volibear and Warwick. Jax's recent success in the jungle bumps him up to the A tier. Karthus received some jungle specific buffs, so he's come out the darkness and joins the squad in that B tier. Xin Zhao falls further down the list into that B tier now after falling really short after his nerfs a few months ago. So, Wukong got some pretty insane buffs this patch, and he shoots straight all the way up to that S tier from the B tier. Not only did they improve Wukong's jungle clear strength, but they also allowed his W to go over walls now. Wukong has been a fairly underrated champion for quite some time, and these changes feel like they could make him absolutely broken. Wukong is a strong early game duelist who can snowball very quickly and then go into the mid game with his ultimate, which gives him the ability to play however he wants to. He can assassinate backlines, he can engage for his team, he can peel, and he can also just basically knock up everyone and be a real nuisance. This makes him a really versatile pick already, and then you factor in all the unique angles, escapes and unconventional gank paths that are now opened up with Wukong's clone changes, and you've got a surprisingly strong champion to go for this patch. Lillia also got a few buffs, and these will likely boost her popularity slightly. Lillia received quite a few minor buffs over the course of this season now, so at some point this champion is really going to come to life. She's been a very misunderstood and underrated champion for quite some time, and she does have a pretty unique playstyle. She's all about weaving in and out of fights, burning her enemies down and kiting with her crazy movement speed steroids. So in a game full of one-shot burst damage, she can struggle to do this properly. In the right hands though, and against the right team composition, Lillia can absolutely 1v5, and in my opinion she's one of the hardest champions to deal with. Lillia's ridiculous movement speed and consistent damage output is one thing, but that 5-man sleepy ultimate is probably one of the scariest things in the entire game to get hit by, especially in the late game. Jax has been having a great time recently ever since those buffs he got a few patches ago, and it's actually had a very positive effect on his strengths as a jungler. Jax's win rate in the jungle is pretty impressive at the moment, and he just doesn't actually have too many weaknesses here. His jungle clear is not too bad, he's got very strong early ganks, he's got lots of mobility, and this role actually just kind of allows him to scale up really quickly, especially when you don't have to worry about getting camped in that top lane, getting zoned off CS, and just falling really far behind. In the jungle, you just hit jungle camps, gank with your counter strike, and delete objectives when there's nothing left to farm. If you can also play jungle Jax fairly selfishly and manage to pick up some decent attacks from a lane or two as well, you can spike very quickly, and you become almost ahead of the game in terms terms of your strength. Jungle Jax is doing pretty awesome right now, so give it a go. Moving on to the mid lane now, and in the god tier we've got Diana, Anivia, Veigar, Neeko and Ahri. The terrible twins Yasuo and Yone both got buffed this patch after getting hit a bit recently by those lifesteal nerfs. Yasuo jumps up to the A tier to join his brother, and we'll keep a close eye on how these two perform over this patch. Kassadin drops down a tier alongside Corki, who has fallen into the C tier after really losing his mojo, especially compared to the start of the season. Pantheon got some interesting changes this patch, and this will encourage a lot more people to pick him up again. He's got less overall AoE damage but longer range on his Q, and there's also a few big quality of life changes that should make him feel much smoother. Pantheon has secretly already had a very impressive win rate in the mid lane for the last few patches, and that's why he's already been in the A tier. We think these changes and the increase in popularity will make a lot of people realise just how strong this champion can actually be in the right hands though, and therefore he's heading to the S tier for this week. Pantheon's ability to snowball games with his early game damage and his global presence and gank potential with his ultimate make him a very scary mid laner to play against, so be prepared to remember just how good this champion can be. Neeko has been in the S tier since her buffs a few patches ago, and guess what, she's getting buffed again. Neeko still doesn't have the best play rate in the world despite being an incredibly strong champion right now and boasting a super impressive win rate. Neeko's got early game kill threat, she's got poke, she's got jukes and tricks, and of course don't forget her insane team fighting ultimate. Neeko's ability to carry games is as obvious as any, as her initiation, CC and damage with her ultimate is just mental. The best thing about Neeko as well is that a ton of players just don't know how to play against her, and her passive allows her to really abuse this to come out on top in a lot of games. Pyke has been popping off in the mid lane for the last few patches, and a lot of that actually seems to be linked to Death's Dance. The Duskblade's stealth and the Death's Dance healing upon resets is super strong with Pyke's ultimate. Pyke has early game damage, he has insane snowball potential and carry potential, and his roaming is just ridiculous. Pyke's a skirmishing monster, and he seeks out aggression wherever he goes, meaning he's absolutely insane in those crazy games with kills going on all over the place. Pyke has a really good early kill threat at level 2, he can set up ganks super well and he can roam around the map with his jungler to completely dominate games. If you enjoy a very aggressive roam heavy mid lane playstyle, then Pyke is a fantastic pick to go for this patch. Oh, and by the way, the recent Ashen Knight skin is incredible. Onto the bottom lane now, and in the god tier we have Vayne, Jhin, Jinx and Veigar. Kalista got some buffs this patch, so she finally joins the low elo tier list in the B tier. Kalista is very difficult and has been poor for quite some time, so let's see if these changes can make any difference. Caitlyn moves down to the B tier to join her, as Caitlyn's just not been winning too many games in low elo, which is fairly surprising as Caitlyn has historically always been really good at lower ranks. Gale Force also got nerfed this patch too, so those champions that rely on it like Jhin may take a bit of a hit. We are not going to move Jhin down for the time being though, as he's been so good all season, so let's see how this patch week goes and how it affects him. Miss Fortune has been winning a hell of a lot of games recently due to the strength of her lethality, Muramana and Eclipse build. This build just makes her abilities and especially her ultimate deal an unthinkable amount of damage, and you basically just murder any squishies who walk into it in a matter of seconds. Miss Fortune's strengths in lane always set her up to do well, and if she gets through the lane phase without being too far behind, her ultimate will always be impactful. Miss Fortune is also arguably one of the easiest AD carries to win games on, as even if you're not having the best game and you're not that good mechanically, one ultimate is all it takes to turn a difficult fight. Miss Fortune also has a ton of movement speed due to her passive, and she farms very easily with her love tap, so this adds to the list of fantastic reasons why to play her in low elo. Vayne has been very strong throughout the whole of Season 12 so far, but she did take a hit after a few nerfs towards the start of the season. Since then though, she's remained in a very good position, and a lot of her fellow strong AD carry rivals have been nerfed. Therefore she's starting to come out on top again. Vayne's core item spike is as early as it's ever been, and with just shield bow and Quintu's range blade she becomes everything you want her to be. Vayne's insane damage is one thing, but her ability to completely outplay entire teams with her kiting and her self-peel means she's easily one of the best champions in the game to carry with. Veigar is yet another champion who's been having the season of his life. Veigar's been top tier in the mid and bot lanes for quite a few patches, and there's just no stopping him anytime soon. Veigar scales up beautifully and becomes an absolute menace in the late game, as you all know. But he also sets up ganks incredibly effectively, and also contributes enough in those early game skirmishes and 2v2s from the bot lane enough to make him spike earlier. Veigar doesn't have to deal with many assassins in the bot lane, and under the protection of a support too, it just feels so much safer to play him downstairs. Veigar bot works with so many different supports, and against most matchups too, so there's usually always a route you can take to scale up and carry those games. Finally, we move on to the support role, and no big changes here aside from a little nerf to Moonstone Renewer. In the god tier, we've still got Soraka, Sona and Janna alongside Zyra and Nami. Pyke moves up to the A tier after some recent success over the last week or two, and plus Umbral Glaive has been buffed, which is going to help him out too. Zyra has been winning a stupid amount of games this season, and for a mage in the bot lane that's very impressive against so many high sustaining champions. Well, this patch with the nerf to Moonstone Renewer, she's only going to get better. Zyra has relentless poke, consistent damage and constant kill threat, all of which make her very difficult to beat throughout the lane phase. Zyra is one of those supports that if she gets a bit of gold early game, she can just punish the bot lane so hard on her own, and let her AD just sit there and farm away for free. Zyra is also very hard to gank due to her AoE CC and damage, and this can lead to 2v3s happening fairly often. Zyra has a ton of oppressive traits, and so far this season she's having a brilliant time. In a season where enchanters and hypercarries are dominating, Zyra still boasts one of the best win rates from that support role in low elo. Renata Glasc has burst into popularity over the last few patches, and now she's pretty heavily contested. She now has a similar number of games to those other dominant support picks, and players have really understood how crazy this champion can actually be. Renata is pretty poor throughout the early game due to her long cooldowns, so all you have to do is rush a bit of ability haste and get those cooldowns into a more manageable range. As soon as you have got some, you realise just how insane this champion's kit is. She's got it all really. She's got damage, poke, CC, shields, revives, and her ultimate is just mental, especially the later the game goes on. Renata has some incredible synergies with other aggressive bot laners too. Samira, Draven, Tristana, or anyone that can really abuse the strength of that W buff and its ability to revive you and reward you for playing aggressive. Renata only gets stronger as the game progresses, so if you haven't played her this patch yet, what are you waiting for? Janna is still the queen of peel, and those changes she received to her kit and design earlier on in this season have just made her such a more complete champion. Janna's Q is now a lot harder to dodge, her ultimate heals like an absolute monster, and those shields are just bigger and better than ever. With so many hard engaging diving comps in the game, Janna's Q and R still offers some of the best peel in the game for any support champion. As Wukong also got hard buff this patch, Janna will instantly become more contested as she's so great against champions like him who want to dive in and deal damage and CC. Janna doesn't actually really have a weak period in any game at the moment. She's more than capable of laning well, she has a fantastic mid game, and she has so much utility and potential in the late game to keep her strong throughout all games. Janna has been performing super well since those changes and continues to do so and will do so in patch 12.7. Well, that brings us to the end of our tier list for low elo. Remember, if you are a high ranking player, we also have our high elo tier list on our website, so go check that out if you haven't already by clicking the link in the description. That's all from us here today at Mobalytics, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.